Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Fire and Rescue online public meeting. Uh, we've got the fire chief on the line. I'm going to just suggest that we've got apologies from the deputy fire officer, but I just wondered if I could just ask the fire chief to introduce the other people on the call who are going to be doing some of our presentations.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Without going around everywhere, but first off, I'll start with Charlie French. Charlie has just returned from maternity leave, so this is her first meeting. So welcome, Charlie. Thanks for being here and back in the team. Charlie's our Director of Service Design and Delivery, so effectively Charlie deals with the support services side of the business. Damien Henderson is our Area Manager, who is presenting today as Director of Service Improvements and Assurance, alongside colleague Ewan Long, who is our Group Manager for Hambleton, who's also worked on a lot of our data and statistic analysis for the future Community Risk Management Programme. And then finally, we have Tom Hurst, who is our Director of Community Risk and Resilience, leading on prevention and protection.
Brilliant, thank you. And we're also joined by Fiona Kinnear from my office within the Office for Police, Fire and Crime. And I think we're also going to be joined by Mark Ayres, who was on another meeting immediately before this one. So I'm sure he will join this when he can. Before we just move on to the formal part of the agenda, I did just want to draw people's attention briefly to the government's response to the second Grenfell fire report, which was published yesterday. It's obviously will be at the forefront of people's minds. I just wonder if I could ask the fire chief for any assurances that he's able to give around the measures that are being put in place for the public across York and North Yorkshire. Obviously, we want everyone to be able to live in a safe home, and the Mayor and I want to ensure that we have safe places for everyone across the region. The fire chief and I have regular conversations about this in formal executive board meetings about the work that's taking place already across the region. But I just wanted to ask for any assurances that he's able to give here and the things that will be happening going forward as a result of the inquiry that might be useful to the wider public in terms of that wider piece of reassurance on the work that I know is taking place, but they will also want to be assured about.
Understandably, and thank you, Deputy Mayor. Both yourself and the public can be assured that North Yorkshire has done everything it possibly can to achieve all the recommendations from the Grenfell inquiry. Now, this has been a lot of work undertaken in service, but we must be mindful that there isn't a significant risk within York and North Yorkshire of fires in high-rise or higher-rise buildings. So internally, we have the governance and assurance processes. We've delivered additional training, we've purchased new equipment, and this also includes training with colleagues in control to make sure that they receive and are able to deliver fire survival guidance should someone be trapped in a premise and requiring assistance. The control operators will work with them whilst the crews attend and ultimately fight the fire. Additionally to this, and to make sure that both you and I were assured of the work that was going on in service, I had an independent report and review done by internal audit, and this gave a statement of substantial assurance of the work that had been undertaken, of the outcomes we'd achieved, and also the governance that we actually follow through in reporting and obviously you holding the service to account. So the public can be assured that we are not being complacent. We will continue to work on everything we can and will do, which includes with partners and stakeholders. We're delivering in service, and we've enhanced our protection teams to make sure that the built environment is as safe as it can be within York and North Yorkshire. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And I know that when we're talking about some of the performance and the home safety visits and those kind of things, actually that community resilience, some of that actually is part and parcel of the public engagement in those processes is really vital to ensuring that both sides of things are doing everything they can to ensure that buildings are as safe as they can possibly be, and also ensuring that we've got a resourced fire service that is able to respond to things when they occur, and that we've got those systems in place and the leadership in place to ensure that if any incidents do occur, that we've got the right systems to keep the public as safe as we possibly can.
Absolutely, yes.
Great, brilliant. All right, thank you. So there are no minutes from the previous meeting, but the previous meetings can be viewed on the website as they can for the police service. We are going to start with the performance section of the data. Who is presenting this one?
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor. That's myself,
Thank you, Damien.
Damien Henderson. Please just let me know when you can see the slides.
I can see your slides.
Lovely, thank you. So this performance update is up to and including the 31st of December 2024, and it will follow the same format as previous updates. So with regards to our prevention activity and focusing in on our home fire safety visits, as you can see from the slides, the current year is on the left, and we have had a slight increase in output of around 10%. So we've done 3,055 home fire safety visits up to the 31st of December, compared to 2,766 in the previous year. The huge improvement that we've made is with regards to our referral pathways and ensuring that that activity is directed to those most in need in our communities. And as you can see from the lower graphs there, we've done over 2,000 high and 339 very high risk sites. That's compared to the previous year where we had 383 at the same time. So our targeting has actually meant that we've gone into 2,000 more properties of those that would be classified as high and very high. So much more improved, focused work that we're undertaking.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions on that. One was just to ask if anyone who is watching thinks that they might want or need a home fire safety visit, how would they go about asking for one? And then just probably a more technical question, but in terms of those vulnerabilities, how do we know what data kind of mapping are we using to identify what we consider to be the most vulnerable groups who are most at risk, whether that's about their demographics or whether it's about the building itself? Just anything else you can add on that would be really helpful.
Certainly, Deputy Mayor. So with regards to if someone is wanting a home fire safety visit, they can access our website. That will take them through an online assessment, and if they do require a visit by one of our crews or specialist officers from our prevention team, that can be arranged directly from the website. The way in which we assess the high and very high and all of the risk ratings there, it is a person-centred approach. It includes a number of demographic items, including age, disability, all of those things that might increase their risk in the unlikely event that they had a fire. And what happens now through our interaction with the provider SafeLinks, what we can do at the actual referral stage is make sure that we've assessed against those key demographic areas to ensure ourselves that we are spending our time going into those most vulnerable in our communities.
And do you take referrals around that from other partners as well as from people directly in your own risk assessments?
Yes, we do, and we've got an electronic app now that allows partner agencies, Yorkshire Ambulance Service and others, that they can directly refer people in, and as I've said, those people will have already been assessed, and we will be able to ensure that our activity is directed to those most in need. But yes, our partner agencies, and currently all of the activity that you see in front of you, the 3,055, all of those are directly from referring partners. What we're looking to introduce into the next financial year is focused address lists, where that is an assessment of the data that we use internally. That will allow us to target our interventions better, given the geographic risk. So where we know that response times are unavoidably longer, we would be able to do some of that geographic targeting that we can't currently do when it's referrals from partners.
Great. All right, that's brilliant. Thank you. You can move on.
Thank you. With regards to our prevention activity, we do set out quite distinct targets for us to make contact with people that have been referred in. So that is 28 days for medium, 14 days for a high risk, and 7 days for a very high risk individual.
Sorry, how many for a very high one?
7 days. 7 days that we will have made
right,
contact. What we ensure that we do, and this is through the Community Risk and Resilience Group, that we monitor each of those referrals, because on some occasions we can't make, we attempt to make that initial contact, but they may be in hospital. So we make sure that we've got a narrative in place for each of those. As you can see from the data to the left-hand side, we did have 27 that were past the day. All of those individuals that haven't had an home fire safety visit by those times has got a comprehensive narrative of the attempts that we've made, trying to liaise with the referring agency just to make sure that we get into all of those referrals and make sure that we do that in as timely manner as we can, given that there may be restrictions placed upon the occupier.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
As we've seen in previous months, home fire safety visits is one key element that we have in our prevention activity, but we do lots of other activity. Those activities are linked in with the priorities that we discussed within the risk and resource model. So as you can see on the left-hand side, a number of areas that we've done there with regards to youth engagement, deployments and interventions on our roads, including fire bike deployments.
You're going to have to tell us a bit more about the fire bike. I know about the fire bike, but I think it's probably quite important for the public to understand the wider strategic purpose of the fire bike. Just because of the most people's response is, how do you put a fire out from a fire bike? So if you could just clarify its wider purpose, that would be great.
Certainly, Deputy Mayor. So with regards to some of our priorities, one of the priorities in our risk and resource model was to make sure that people are safer on our roads. Obviously, everyone that's probably listening to this meeting is aware of our natural beauty in North Yorkshire and the lovely rural roads that we have. And we do have a lot of visitors that come into our county for motorbike riding. What we have got within the service, we have 2 fire bikes, and we've got a number of volunteers across different services, from the police, from fire and volunteers. They will go out on certain occasions. They will go to known hotspots where we do have accidents on our roads, and they will engage with those motorbike riders just to make sure that we're giving them all the road safety advice that we can, and hopefully changing some of their behaviours on the road, because it is one of our key priorities in the risk and resource model.
Great, thank you. And certainly when I met the guys that work with the fire bikes, I think it was in Easingwold for the Road Safety Partnership, they were very passionate about the work that they're able to do and the engagement that they're able to have with a group of members of the public that might otherwise be quite hard to engage with on road safety issues. So I don't know whether, Tom, whether there's anything else from a Road Safety Partnership that you wanted to add there, particularly around the fire bike, but feel free to come in or not if it's useful to add anything else.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. A little bit about, well, yeah, we've used as a really good engagement tool, certainly with the biking community. We use the data from the Road Safety Partnership to identify common roads being used, venues where people might stop, where we can have those engagements with them. But as well as having those interactions with them there and then, we've also then guided them onto different schemes, such as the Biker Down and the Biker Safe scheme with the police as well. So yeah, it works really well. We're going out together with the police, and we did a couple of events with the ambulance service as well. So yeah, it seems to really attract people in, so we can have those meaningful conversations with them about road safety.
Brilliant, thank you. Sorry, Damien, you can carry on.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and just some other events there that do tie into our strategic priorities. So we've done a number of water prevention activities in the year up to the 31st of December, and also prevention activities around wildfire, and obviously being safe and ensuring that you're doing activities safe when you're going out for walks within our sort of national parks. So lots of prevention activity that cover across all of our priorities. Yes, we certainly make ensure that through the home fire safety visits that we're making people safe in their homes, but we also do a lot of activity to cover some of those other risks that we have in North Yorkshire and the City of York, including water and extreme weather events.
Brilliant. What would be useful, perhaps for future meetings around prevention, would be to understand those activities and the volume of those activities compared to previous years. So just to kind of understand, you know, the number of water safety or wildfire prevention work or chimney fire, whatever it is, how that work is comparing year on year. That would be really useful to know. I was also just keen to ask you, because I'm you obviously do quite a lot of work with schools and with young people. How are you able to assess the impact of it beyond the number of the actual engagements that you might have had?
I will start with that, Deputy Mayor, but I'm sure if I'm missing any of the detail, Tom, who leads on this, will come in. But certainly as part of the improvements that we've made in prevention, and these were a couple of areas for improvement that came from NYFRS in our last inspection. We have ensured that across our range of prevention activities that we do now have a quality assurance process to make sure that what we are delivering across the service area is of a consistent standard, but we also have introduced evaluation across all of our range of activities, and that will include speaking when we've done these interventions, speaking with the people that we've done the intervention with, and seeing how the information that we've been provided, be that in a school or during a home fire safety visit, how that may have adapted their behaviours. And that is all recorded within our community risk and resilience dashboard.
Yeah, thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that particular slide? Or if I had a question about compliance, should I ask it now?
There was nothing for me further on that slide,
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So just on the non-compliant fire standard data that was on there, it was just really to understand a little bit more about those standards, if you can say anything else, but also what the escalation process is around non-compliant standards, if there's anything you can say about that part of that slide.
Certainly, I can talk broadly around the fire standards because there's over 20 fire standards, Deputy Mayor, that cover numerous areas that we cover throughout the organisation. So prevention is one, driving, how we develop our community risk management plan. Each of those have got fire standards. They do have a number of actions and priorities for services to consider when they're doing that. With regards that, sometimes, as you can see there, it says fully compliant, partial compliant, non-compliant. There may be areas within each of the fire standards that we are just not going to do. It isn't a traffic light system where it's just green, amber, red. We need to focus on the reds. Actually, some of those red areas, we've made a decision as a service that actually for our service in the context in which North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue work, we won't address that. All of our fire standards are tracked through a watch manager in service improvement and assurance. Each of the fire standards has a senior responsible, owner, and they sit down on a monthly, quarterly basis to go through that fire standard to prioritise the activities which will make most difference in us reaching those fire standards. The fire standards are never expected to be right, we've completed, we can move on. It is a continuous improvement journey with the fire standard that they don't expect you to have sort of gone, yes, we've signed that one off.
Great. Okay, thank you. Tom, if you could come in, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just in relation to that one as well, the safeguarding one, we hosted the NFCC Safer Recruitment back in October, November time. So we had members of staff attend that, as well as every other fire and rescue service from the north of England. That was held at our HQ at North Allerton. On the back of that, that is an area we were waiting that. It was slightly delayed. Package coming out through the NFCC that is now live, and we have our trainers trained, but now it's about training the rest of the talent and recruitment team to then be able to actually say that we are an official safer recruiter on the back of that training course. So that's that area of non-compliance current, but it's been worked on, and all of the safeguarding is measured at the safeguarding compliance meeting that we hold quarterly, and then it's a verbal update to SLB quarterly, and every 6 months it's a written paper. So there is assurances there the safeguarding compliance is in place.
Brilliant. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Damien, we can move on to the next one.
Thank you. So we're moving over into protection. So this is our business fire safety and the work that we've done with regards to our built environment. As you can see from the slide, overall fire safety activity has increased by 9.5% on the same reporting period last year. We've completed 3,744 jobs, which equates to 183 days of activity. Most of our activity in this area is with regards to fire safety audits. So what that will be is where we have either crews or our specialist protection staff going into our businesses up and down the county, undertaking an audit, giving recommendations to those. With regards to that, as you can see from the bottom, we have developed now, which will be starting at the start of the new financial year, our risk-based intervention programme. That has been developed and identified all the very high and high-risk premises across North Yorkshire and the City of York. Each of those premises will be inspected regardless of compliance over a 3-year period. So what we will be able to do in future meetings of this Deputy Mayor is say where we are. Are we ahead of schedule with our risk-based inspection programme? Are we on schedule, or are we slightly behind schedule? The other activity that you see there is at times we give guidance to businesses to assist them in their fire safety work, and we give them advice. We also do statutory and non-statutory consultations. So this can be for changes to buildings or new builds across our county. And we also do licensing consultations. We have got a really impressive response rate to these consultations. I think for building consultations, it's 100%. For licensing, it's 99.9%, which does compare extremely favourably when you look across the wider fire sector. So lots of activity with regards to our fire protection work, and that will only move forward again next year when we bring in the risk-based intervention programme, albeit that will focus on those highest risk premises. There will be other work that we can do where we're sampling other businesses up and down the county, and we will look to include in that looking at those buildings in our most rural areas that have got high societal value. So for instance, primary schools in our most rural areas, we will look to sample some of them to ensure that they have their fire safety precautions all in place.
Just a couple of things from me on that
Certainly.
one. Just the bar chart, AFAS, and I think one of them's unwanted fire something. Can you just translate the acronyms on the slide? And this might be one for JD actually to come in on as the fire chief. But at the moment, I was just interested in the statutory responses around and regulatory activity that the service carries out. So at the moment, there are areas where you'd be a statutory requirement for the fire service to be consulted and to give advice around, for example, a new building. But I think my understanding is that there are new evolving areas, in particular around the development of either solar panel farms or battery storage units, where at the moment there is a bit more challenge in that area in terms of the role of the fire service. I just wondered whether the fire chief could just come in just to clarify what the situation is currently in terms of the role of the service in that area.
Yes, no problem. Apologies if it's the signal's buffering at my end. So yes, so we are statutory consultees for specific parts of the legislation in relation to buildings, so housing, hotels, and those aspects, particularly where there's life risk. We are not statutory consultees, which means that we do not have to be informed where or BESS, which is battery electrical storage systems. That doesn't mean that we're not involved and that we're not trying to build relationships with developers and with our planning partners in the councils to make sure that we are still part of that planning decision. The National Fire Chiefs Council released guidance last year upon the fire services expectations on safety from a fire perspective that developers and councils should use for a fire response. That is widely available on the National Fire Chief Council's website, and also we have a link on our own website. What this means is that any advice or guidance that is perceived, we will only follow the guidance that is given by the Chiefs Council. We're happy to then sit with partner agencies, the councils, etc., to work on where that guidance would be and how we would help to implement it. But ultimately, the final decision is down to the councils and cannot and will not currently take into account the fire services objections. We will, of course, work with any developers or any companies that contact us, but we cannot open that relationship directly because the councils and the planning authorities are the statutory individuals which authorise or not those building consultations and whether the planning consents. So we're trying to work with everybody, but again, we are not the primary partner in this, but we are working with those relationships to make sure we are part of the solution.
But certainly as the kind of demands in that area of development are growing,
Yes.
just along with the Fire Chiefs Council, is just whether or not, particularly given the rural nature of our region and the number of opportunities or likely applications that are coming in this kind of area, it may be worth us making some formal representation nationally around that consultation and the role of the service in that space going forward, but given the level of impact it has on our region. I don't know whether there's anything else you want to add on that, or otherwise we can move on.
No, I think you're right, Deputy Mayor. Look, North Yorkshire is somewhere where there are large scales because of the county and the size of the county and the large, open geographic areas. But again, the service will always approach this from what is the safety standard that we need to achieve to make sure the public are safe either in or around those sites. I think it would be an advantage for the service or the fire service as an entity to be a statutory consultee, but I recognise that would need potential funding and growth in some areas of those departments where there are large-scale systems and potential large amounts of applications coming through for that to be resourced appropriately.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. I hadn't fully anticipated that that's what that slide was about. So sorry, that wasn't even on my list of questions. We can move on to the next question, Damien.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and you were quite right. It was unwanted fire signals and also automatic fire alarm signals. So they're the fire alarms in commercial buildings.
Right.
So apologies, I did miss that acronym.
Don't worry.
The next slide is with regards to the amount of incidents that we've been to in the current year today, and also our response time. So as you can see there, incidents are relatively similar to the previous year. We've actually had 225 more incidents in 24-25 than we did at the same period last time. The proportion of the incidents are very similar. False alarms are still our most prevalent incident type, then followed by special service incidents that can be anything from supporting other agencies to responding to incidents on our roads or incidents in our water, and then fire-related incidents, which can be fires in the open, refuse fires, or also fires in our buildings. As you were aware, we consulted upon our response standard recently, and the response standard for all incidents we have set at 13 minutes, and for dwelling fires we've set that response standard at 11 minutes. Our current performance against that expected is 12 minutes 13 for all incidents and 10 minutes 40 seconds to dwelling fires. If anything, Deputy Mayor, those times do usually come down through a quality assurance process. What we have seen over recent months, when we have a look at some of our incidents, because in the way that they're sort of allocated and assigned, sometimes some of the incidents fall into the wrong categories. That is one of the reasons that we're looking to get an additional data modeler into our team to be able to make sure that all of the data that we provide with this is as accurate as possible. But that is our current performance, and again is within that time frame that's expected.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of things. One, just on that point we were just talking about, if you can just clarify, a dwelling fire response, does that mean an actual fire in an actual building, or would that also include the false alarms to dwellings? And I then had a couple of other questions just around the fire data. The increase of 73, just whether there was any indication of the different types of fires, and whether there was anything indicating any trends there. And then I was just going to also pick out that the months of fire activity looked to be particularly out of sync in August and November. November, obviously, it is a more obvious month because of bonfire night and the firework activity that takes place in November. I just wondered if there's anything that had happened in August, which I can't immediately think of, not least because I'd only just started in this role at that point. But if there was anything you could say about what had happened in August to have had that significant number of fire incidents that month. Sorry, that was quite a few things all at once.
No, that's fine, Deputy Mayor. So with regards to the dwelling fires, that is actual fires within
actual buildings.
Within a dwelling, yes. So a home address. False alarms, albeit they may come through initially as a fire in a home. Once it has been updated to a false alarm, they would be removed from those statistics. It is slightly different, and the Home Office sometimes talk about primary fires. Primary fires do include dwelling fires, but they also include a number of other items similar to crops on farmland, those sort of things, car fires potentially, those areas. With regards to the fire data, August, that wouldn't normally be unusual, Deputy Mayor. Usually in the summer months, because it relates to fires in general, we do get a higher number of fires in the open. You know, if we have warm weather, warm weekends, obviously that refers back to the prevention activity that we do in those picturesque places, ensuring that people that are enjoying our scenery are doing so in a safe manner. So
does that mean disposable barbecues then potentially and things like that?
certainly that would be the work that we're doing to ensure that people don't do that,
Yeah.
and make sure that, you know, everything that they're doing whilst out walking, they're doing safely. But that is usually why we have an increase in those
Right.
warmer months.
Okay, that's really helpful. What else did I? That was it, wasn't it? Those are the three things. Thank you.
I believe so. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And with regards to the last slide, this is around our risk information. So North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, we've got risk information on over 1,400 of our properties up and down North Yorkshire in the City of York. We've also got risk information on water sites, and also we've got wildfire risk plans. These are updated on a regular basis, given the risk rating that you see there, from very high to low. We make sure that those are in date as much as is possible. This was an area that we identified, I think it was approximately in around September, October, Deputy Mayor, that actually we had a growing number of sites that hadn't had an up-to-date risk information. Tom Hurst set up a working group. That working group met on a regular basis to make sure that this was addressed. And as you can see, it talks about it here, 2 high-risk sites were overdue. They're no longer overdue. Obviously, that was from December's figures, and we are well above 95% compliance with making sure all that risk information is up to date and in a usable format for our crews if they had to attend one of those premises for an emergency response.
I've just got one question, I think, really, but just on the water and wildfire risk plans, just what that kind of means, just any detail you can add around that. And it says water and wildfire risk plans that have no risk rating applied. What does that mean?
So once they have been out, so with regards to the water and wildfire risk plans, these are new plans. Ultimately, the SSRIs used to be for properties, for premises. NFCC, National Fire Chiefs Council, instructed that risk sites should also include sites in relation to water and wildfire. So we have got some of our wildfire tactical advisors and some of our water specialists that go out to these sites to look at the sites to see if there are any dangerous conditions there, see if any precautions, any personal protective equipment are needed at those sites. So if we then do respond, and unfortunately at times we do respond to incidents in our waters, that we have got a good idea of everything from where we need to site the appliance, what equipment we would need, best access points. They will try and understand the water dynamics at those locations, so it assists them in the rescue. Hopefully they won't need it, but if we did have an incident in those waters, it will assist them in that rescue and making it as effective as possible.
Brilliant. No, that's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, that's I think the end of those slides. Yeah, I've asked my questions as I was going along, and I think we're now due to move on to the enhancing resilience slides. Is that you again, Damien, or is that someone else?
That will be me.
That's Ewan Long.
Hi, Ewan.
Yeah. So I will share.
So if you want to share your screen, I think we asked for an update on this as part of the risk and resource model. Is that right?
It may have been, so this came through to me from Damien, so it is including some of that information. Is this up on the screen for everybody?
It is. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So, yeah, like you said, this is on enhanced.
We've lost him, I think. Is Ewan still there?
He's on mute, Deputy Mayor.
Oh, right,
My
okay.
apologies, on my back, I might have pressed a button.
All right, don't worry. You can
Excellent.
start again. We heard resilience, but we haven't heard anything else, so you can start
Okay.
again. Thanks.
So looking at community resilience and looking at what it is. So it's the sustained ability of a community to use the available resources to respond to, withstand and recover from adverse situations. And as the Fire and Rescue Service, we can play an integral part in supporting communities to be resilient. The previous government talked about the idea of whole society resilience and how the fire service, as a Category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies Act, can support this. And they look to put the resilience standards, which look to how we plan for and communicate risks to the public on a statutory footing. And the current government, within their manifesto, said that they would formally work with all stakeholders within the fire and rescue services to inform policy and establish national standards around resilience, particularly when they're looking at flooding and so forth. So the inspectorate have an intention to introduce community resilience into the inspection framework, and along with greater assurance of work, which is carried out by ourselves and our partners through North Yorkshire Local Resilience Forum, we ensure that we are providing the right support and guidance to our communities to help them be more resilient to those adverse situations that they might be impacted by. And our work with partners through the LRF and other partnerships which we foster help us to understand local risk and prevent, protect and respond to incidents, and plus the high public perception towards the fire and rescue services makes us well placed to support our communities.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. And just one question really around if you can just say a bit more about the main partners that you would be working with on community resilience and how they can best support the work that the service is trying to do, and then just more widely on that point around high public perception, just anything that we can do to maintain and to build on that.
Sure. So our main and I suppose direct and most long-standing partnership is through the Local Resilience Forum, which we'll talk about again in a bit. But that is the sort of the forum which works across North Yorkshire that brings together Category 1 and Category 2, which is the sort of which are the levels of people who respond to incidents. Brings us together to look at how we can work together to respond. So Category 1 responders, people like ourselves, ambulance service, police service, local authority who have a sort of primary statutory duty to provide housing support and things like that. And then the Category 2 responders are some of our people like our utilities, so power outage, you know, from the Northern Power Grid, water through Yorkshire Water, so forth, Coast Guard are in there, and it also includes the voluntary sectors. And then as well as that, we've got a partnerships manager that works within Tom's team within prevention, and their role is to specifically go out and sort of bridge gaps into organisations who maybe wouldn't sit on the LRF. We haven't got other routes through, so local housing providers, healthcare providers, and all these sort of people who, you know, we can help each other to support the people who essentially come into our care. And one of the big advantages that the fire service does have is that on the whole, we're sort of people like the fire service, you know, that I think out there, the perception of us is quite high, which means that we're able to build a good position of trust within our communities to work with people to, you know, to help deliver some of this resilience work.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, you can carry on.
So we provide emergency fire service cover to the county of North Yorkshire and the city of York. We have 38 fire stations across the county running 4 different shift patterns. And then due to differing staffing levels and to cover illnesses or other absence, it's sometimes necessary to move our firefighters to provide cover in other areas to which they would normally work. And historically, this has been achieved via sort of pre-planned and ad hoc movements, which all either get organised by the district management teams, our fire control operators looking at the fire cover across the board, and the duty tactical officer, who is the nominated officer at group manager level, who will sort of sit at that tactical level during the day and look after things in that regard.
So just on that one,
Yeah.
just just before you move, sorry, just go back to the previous slide. In terms of moving firefighters to provide cover, if you could just say a bit more about how that is managed, and just ensuring that people are, I assume it's around ensuring that people are able to accommodate the needs of the service, and would it also be impacted by things like whether or not there'd been an incident in a particular place, that might have meant that someone has, maybe worked and then isn't, then a service isn't available? How, just a little bit more about how that works, that move and cover, and how we ensure that staff and firefighters are supported if they're then moving around.
Sure. So what I'll do is I'll bring up the next slide, because that sort of helps illustrate some of
Right.
it. So
Great.
Essentially, this slide was here to demonstrate the size of our county, and those dots on the map there are the location and spread of our stations. So you're absolutely right. There's two reasons why we might need to move resources around in order to cover gaps. Some of that might be due to unavailability of resource or workforce rather, sorry, in a certain area, whether that be due to, for example, sickness. And what we would look to do is, prior to that point, we would look across our workforce and look to see where we have additional resources whose removal is not going to impact the service in that local area, and instead we'll pre-plan for somebody to go from there to go work from somewhere else. And due to the size of the county, we'll normally look to do that within, keep that as local as we can, which is where the district sort of station manager teams come in. It's not feasible for us to send somebody necessarily from Scarborough to Bentham on the far side of the county to cover a shift because of the resources involved in doing that.
That's practically a day trip all the other way. It'd take them the whole day to get there.
It's a good few hours each way, yeah. And then the other reason, absolutely. So when we always mobilise to incidents the fastest or the most appropriate resources. So clearly, if you were to have, for example, a fire in York, say a warehouse has caught fire in York, then our initial response will always be to send the quickest response there, which will be the nearest fire engines. And what that then does is it draws all your resources in and around that area into a central location and ties them up. So at which point we then need to look to start moving other resources from elsewhere in the county into that area to cover, to go and sit at York Fire Station, for example, in order to replace that. And again, we'll look to do that. And there's sort of two factors we have to consider there. One of which, again, is the geography. So it's the travel time. How long will it take us to get those resources back in to cover it? And the other is that balancing risk. So what we wouldn't look to do would be to look, for example, to strip Scarborough of appliances to put them into the York area, because that would leave a higher risk area in Scarborough. But there might be other locations, for example, at Tadcaster, we might have 2 fire appliances available in Tadcaster. So we would look to take one of them out of Tadcaster. So we're still providing an immediate emergency response within there, and also therefore put the second one into York. So we're also providing an immediate emergency response in the York area as well. So that's how we would look to do that. Sorry, if I answered those, was there one more?
So just really about how, so from a firefighter point of view, is this just something people are very used to in terms of, particularly in the smaller fire stations, being asked to go and cover? Or is it part and parcel of everybody's role? Does it impact particularly on the full-time firefighters rather than anyone who's on call? Just anything else you can say about that would be great.
So as part of our sort of pre-planned individual staff movements, it is something that our full-time firefighters would expect. That is a sort of normal part of their role. We also have a pool of firefighters, some of whom are permanently employed by us on a 42-hour week, who we can pick from, and their role is specifically to work in those areas of the county where we need them to on any given day, so they can be expected to
I think I met one
some
of those guys in Moulton. Yes, I did.
Yeah, so that they're our OSR pool.
Yeah.
And then as a sort of bolt on to that team, we have people who work for us on called our sort of retained variable hours contracts. So these are people who work for us on an ad hoc basis in that way, but that is our only role. And then there are even occasions where we might look to see if anybody, for example, from the on-call is free for a day and would like a day's work with us, and we can use them as well. In terms of the sort of dynamic fire appliance moves based on incidents, we would look to utilise the best resource that we have available at that time to do it, and that absolutely includes on-call crews. So we would look to take potentially you could have Grassington going from a very small or relatively small village within the middle of the Yorkshire Dales, and they would go and sit at York Fire Station and provide that level of fire cover in York. So that's how that would work there.
Great. And this may be one for the chief rather than for you, although you may also know the answer to this, but presumably compared to other services, this is quite a different model of working. And so therefore the requirements around the management of that process and the role of those officers who are serving as kind of the is it watch manager roles, who would be the post that would be kind of doing that level of coordination and ensuring that if you need to bring people in because there'd been a couple of incidents overnight or whatever, that you might need to either bring in or move people around, just to understand how that functions, particularly given our geography and the fact that we have such a large area to cover all the time to ensure that people are safe. Just anything around that kind of back room is probably the wrong way of putting it, but the management of all of that.
So at the moment, the way we would work for our pre-planned moves is fire control. We have a capabilities admin team, and our fire control staff will work with the duty tactical officer to they will look at what our availability looks like the next day, so the day after, and based on the resources that we've got in place, they will then work together to select the stations that they would like to see that cover put into. And they'll then work with our capabilities admin team, who will do that actual level of practical coordination out there. And like you say, it is a different model for different services. Some of our more metropolitan neighbours, because their fire stations are a lot more closely located to each other, it's much easier for them to do dynamic moves with their staff on any given day. I see Chief's got his hand up.
Yeah, come in.
Thank you. Apologies, my signal is terrible, so it is buffering here. Just as an assurance, Deputy Mayor, and also is based on a structure that services do nationally. So all services have the ability to move staff around because we resource to risk. So we will move firefighters and then appliances wherever we need to cover that risk. We move them, as we've discussed, where we have an absence area. Nationally, services, some have them centrally controlled, so a number of people within a resourcing unit which would cover the use and these roles. In some areas it's covered by control, but ultimately this is a national model. It's a national resourcing that is utilised in that way, and we
JD, sorry, apologies, we missed the last sentence of what you just said. If you could just repeat it.
My computer is having a bad day. Yes.
Just the last sentence, sorry.
Ultimately.
Or if you type it in the chat, I'll read it out.
I will do.
Brilliant. Okay, Ewan, you can carry on, and I'll update people on other JD's final words of wisdom there when he's typed them.
Okay, thank you. So we need to understand what the risk is in our community, in sort of reference to what the Chief was saying earlier, and to do that we create a community risk profile. So the resources that we put in place are based on assessment of that risk across the area, and to understand that we consider a wide range of information from a variety of sources. So our community risk profile considers the risks which have been identified through the National Security Risk Assessment, our local community risk registers. We have the National Fire Chiefs methodology for determining the risk of being killed or injured in fires and road traffic collisions. as well as our own sources of intelligence, such as site-specific risk information and info coming from other places, such as planning consultations on developments like you were asking about earlier. And this allows us to develop our community risk management plan, which demonstrates how we intend to mitigate and reduce risk across the service area. And this will then allow us, which does allow us to prioritise the risks we need to focus on, which we're looking at the accidental dwelling fires, which lead to death and serious injury, the incidents on our roads, and incidents which relate to climate change. Primarily for ourselves, that's flooding and different times of year, but wildfire, fires to the moorland and so forth.
Great. The only question I had on that slide was just around those last points around risks and how those are changing and how we might identify some of that, how we kind of, when I say we, I mean the members of the public, would know from your data around any changes around the roads, climate, fire related demand.
So we publish our community risk profile, which is available on our website, and we refresh it regularly in line with our refreshed community risk management plans which come out. So there will be a new and updated community risk profile being published pretty shortly, and that will sort of show you the maps of where, and there's a difference. So people need to understand that when we're looking at it, this is the risk that we see in an area. So for example, the accidental dwelling fire risk methodology looks at lots of different things, indices of multiple deprivation, housing type, tenancy type, and assigns a score to it to say within this area here, this geographic area, we would expect this to be reasonably high risk. That's not to say that everybody who lives in those areas is necessarily at an individual level at high risk of being injured in a fire. But what it does is it tells us that this is an area that we want to redirect our resources, because throughout that area, it is more likely that there will be those fires. And it's the same against the roads and what have you. Incidents related to climate change, we know where our flood mapping layers are. And again, that's information which can be found online, particularly through sort of Environment Agency website, so people can look to see whether or not they live in a floodplain, what the likelihood is of them being impacted by rising river levels.
Great. Just to go back to the previous point that we were talking about around firefighters moving, the chief has posted in the chat, so I'll just read it. Detachments, which are firefighters moving around counties to provide appropriate staffing levels, is undertaken by all fire services. How this is managed varies across each service, but the use of detachments is utilised nationally. So it's something that happens everywhere. We probably do it slightly differently to other areas. But yes, that was the explanation of that previous point around management of the moving of staff depending on risk. Okay, great. We can move on, Ewan, to your next slide.
So this sort of carries on from, excuse me, what you were just saying there, but we've invested in a dynamic cover tool, which helps us to position the available resources to best meet demand. So this takes a live feed of the location of our appliances and any ongoing incidents we have to highlight areas of the county where we might have a gap in resources. And it can propose which available resources to use and where to place them to mitigate against longer attendance times, whilst minimising the impact on areas where the resources are coming from. And it allows us to track in real time our anticipated attendance times to ensure that we meet the standard approved by the public, as well as pre-planning for anticipated adverse events, such as flooding, to ensure that we have the right resources in the areas that need them most.
And at the times of year that we were talking about on the previous slide deck, where, for example, you have August and November, where we saw from the data we knew that we were going to have higher demand, if that's a regular thing, just whether there's anything that this tool can do to factor some of that in, presumably also because those are high periods of demand for other fire services. So that's just a problem in all areas. So it's not like we would be able to call on any resource from as easily from other areas at those times of high demand.
No, absolutely. And July 2022 was a prime example of that, where every single fire service up and down the country was stretched due to the number of fires that we had in place. So with this, for example, although we haven't fully implemented the use of the dynamic cover tool, we've been testing it to ensure that we understand how it works correctly. And 3-4 weeks or so ago, when we had the instances of very high wind, the multi-agency, the local resilience forum had provided information beforehand through the Met Office about where we anticipate the areas of highest wind to be, where the most highest risk of likelihood of any damage occurring is. And what we were then able to do is to use the dynamic cover tool to ensure that in those areas which had been highlighted, we had appropriate resources in place to respond to anything which happened.
And how long have we had this tool?
So this tool, we started the procurement of it back in the autumn. We've only just in the last couple of months been able to, we've got it into service so that it's using our data and it's working in a way that we want it to work. So we want it to answer the questions about the way that we run North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. And at the moment, we're going through the process of ensuring that we know how it works and the appropriate people who are going to be using it are fully trained. And then in the coming weeks, we will be looking to roll it out and be using it on a daily basis in the
Brilliant.
control room amongst duty tactical officers and anybody else who needs it.
That it looks extremely useful. Thank you. I didn't have anything else on that one.
Okay. Let's click through the. So our control room. So our fire control room is the hub for where all our incidents come in, and the resilience and effectiveness of this part of our operation is key to ensure that we provide an effective service to the community. So to improve resilience within our control room, we are looking to increase staffing in there from 17 personnel to 19 from April this year. And this will allow us to always plan for 3 control room operatives on duty. It'll also provide additional ranks at watch manager level, which will support resilience arrangements during incident and as well as increasing opportunities for staff. And it will allow us to develop new control firefighters more quickly and get them operating independently during emergencies in a shorter period of time. We're also introducing control room national interagency liaison officers, which is a role that can maintain communication with police and ambulance, particularly during security threat type incidents, and they will be there to support our operational NILOs, National Incident Liaison Officers. We're creating a standalone fallback control room with additional workstations so that we've got a complete mirror of our business as usual arrangements should for any reason we need to leave our control room. And we're undertaking a refresh of the technical hardware to make the control room more resilient to power outages.
Great. Just on that one, just anything you can just say about the recruitment process for those control room staff? I've been into the control room. They do a magnificent job. It's extremely kind of high intensity when the phone kind of rings and everyone suddenly has to be able to respond and be able to use and all of those data platforms really quickly to make sure that things are identified and the right services deployed, and then all that backup activity then happens. And then just the other point on recruitment. So the National Interagency Liaison Officer, is it an officer or is that something that would be available 24/7?
So if I start with the National Interagency Liaison Officer role, so that is a bolt-on to other people's jobs. So I'm a NILO, for example, so I will do periods of duty when I am the duty NILO. So we always have at least one NILO available at any given time. And for the control room, that will be a bolt-on to the station manager in control, and then some of the watch managers in control room as well, so that we've got 24/7 availability of those resources. As regards recruitment into control more generally, is very timely, and I should have probably thought to use this as a plug, but currently we are recruiting for our control room right now. So we've put out a job advert for a pool of people, and actually we're looking at not just new firefighters fresh into looking to start from the ground up. We're also looking to see if anybody who works in other services who's already a trained control room operator would like to join North Yorkshire Fire Service at either firefighter, crew manager, and also watch manager level. For sort of absolutely fresh out the box new recruits, they'll go through a process which their assessment will include their ability to type, ability to operate under pressure, because like you said, it can be, particularly when we're in periods of high demand, it can be a very high pressure environment to work in. And then once they start, they'll go through a development period where they'll be taught how to use all the systems, how to answer the phone calls, and then it's a sort of a stepped scenario whereby they'll pass a series of assessments, and at each assessment they will gain more freedom in becoming a standalone control room operator.
Great. Just the bottom bullet point around power outages, just if you can just explain what happens in the event of a power outage. I think some people may be aware of the partnership with Cornwall's Fire and Rescue Service, but if you could just say a little bit about what that situation is, and whether that arrangement's in place and what it means.
Sure. So we have, I suppose, initial resilience operations. So we have things like backup generators and what have you to take over should the control room experience a power cut in the first place. But then if for any reason we are either unable to take calls for a period of time, or also if during periods of really high demand, we start getting more calls than our control operators can handle, we're in a partnership with Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, and essentially we share a mobilizing system. So we share a computer software system which tells us which appliances to mobilize when, and should for any reason our system become overwhelmed or a power outage, we have a fault that it doesn't operate, it will naturally fall to Cornwall and vice versa. So Cornwall have the ability to take our 999 calls, their system will propose the correct appliances to go attend those incidents, and then they will be able to mobilise them as well. Same that we can do for Cornwall Fire and Rescue, so that gives us that level of resilience there. And then with our fallback systems, because it's always still best, our control operators have local knowledge. They know our service, they know our local areas. That'll give us an opportunity to move into our fallback control room and reset up there, and we would take back over running of our operations.
Great, that's really helpful, thank you. And how often has it ever been used?
Well, we train regularly with Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service. We undertake call swaps with them, and that sort of happens on a fairly regular basis. We stand up sometimes if we are having some hardware work done on our system. We'll stand up Cornwall, pre-warn them, say, look, can you take our fire calls this period of time because we're having a firewall refresh done or something like that. So that happens fairly regularly. Our control room having to go into their sort of fallback is infrequent, as you would hope it would be.
Great. Yeah, no, I do hope it would be. Fantastic. You can move on to the next slide.
Okay. So this one's just looking at sort of the local resilience forums. We've mentioned them briefly already, but the one we work within is North Yorkshire Local Resilience Forum. And LRFs respond to large-scale emergencies when a multi-agency approach results in a more effective and efficient outcome, and is a key part of the mechanism whereby we discharge our duties under the Civil Contingencies Act. So all LRF partners share responsibility to develop York and North Yorkshire's ability to respond to and recover from large-scale emergency situations. And we work with them to implement recommendations to support communities which have been made after events such as Grenfell or COVID. So, for example, a really important element on helping people recover from something like the Grenfell Tower tragedy is how we, as a fire and rescue service, deal with local government in ensuring that those evacuated from a premises are provided the right support, which is critical to supporting long-term recovery. And that's long-term recovery is not normally an area that the fire and rescue service are deeply involved with. We're an active participant on all meeting groups within the LRF, where we chair the risk assessment group and the training and exercise groups. And we have a seat at the table on the community resilience, the business continuity and the communication groups, as well as all the governance groups. And we, as in North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, through the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, sponsored a review from external consultants on the effectiveness of North Yorkshire Local Resilience Forum, and they'll publish the results in the coming weeks, but the initial indications suggest that we provide a well-coordinated and resilient response to the communities of North Yorkshire and the City of York.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, carry on, sorry.
I was going to say, so the work of the RF ensures we have risk assessed, prepared and tested our plans to maximise community resilience across the service. And we've also been a key part of the production of the Community Risk Register, which has happened through the risk assessment and the communication groups. And that document provides advice to businesses and the public in how to deal with adverse events which may impact them, and that includes case studies and what fellow members of their communities have learned about post-incident.
And when you've had those kind of planning and testing incidents with partners, I think that's kind of what you were saying at the end there.
Yeah.
How do you kind of how do we communicate with that about that in a kind of point of reassurance really to the public that you know these partners and this resilience forum is working together, and how do we know, how would the public know that it's working effectively?
So at the moment there's no statutory assurance of local resilience forums. We all have our own duties that we need to sort of through the Civil Contingencies Act that we use the local resilience forum to. But in the future, that looks like that'll be coming a more structured footing, so there will be official reports produced by inspectors. Same goes for as and when the inspectorate starts looking at us from our community resilience point of view. That will be very heavily reliant on what the work that we do within the LRF. At the moment, we're still waiting on the results from the external consultant review, but that will be available for people. And I suppose it's that assurance that actually through North Yorkshire's Local Resilience Forum, and I'm involved in ones across the North East and the rest of the Yorkshire and Humber region as well, that actually North Yorkshire Local Resilience Forum works extremely well. And you know, you have all the partners that you would like to see there come together. They train together, they exercise together, and also we come back together after those events to go through lessons learned and make sure that those lessons learned are embedded.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reassured from a point of view of the work that's taking place. I think there is maybe something that we should pick up outside of this forum around how we ensure that the public, other than telling them that it's all happening, how and what methods we could use to ensure that people actually would be reassured by the work that is taking place behind the scenes. Just from a wider reassurance point of view, but I'm certainly I don't have any other questions on that from from just in terms of the work that's taking place. So thank you.
So this slide looks at our risk information gathering and our prevention protection activity, and actually references quite a lot of things that Damien spoke about earlier on. So our partnership referrals through that being led by our partnership manager identify the most vulnerable in our communities. We've had the introduction of the focused address list, which again Damien spoke about, which allow us to target that prevention activity considering the geographic risk. We have our tri-service public safety officers, and they work within specific communities to prevent vulnerability and reduce harm. We have 2 volunteer fire stations within North Yorkshire, and both of whom respond to a high proportion of medical emergencies. So they're taking calls on behalf of, or responding to calls, sorry, on behalf of Yorkshire Ambulance Service, and ensuring that there's a quick response there, and to be able to put use defibrillators and provide other medical aid.
Yeah.
Other prevention activity, such as the fire bite deployments, wildfire prevention activity, water safety initiatives directly linked to the risks within our community risk profile. And we're introducing specific guidance to support household resilience within the information we provide when carrying out home fire safety visits. So at the end of a home fire safety visit, people get a booklet with advice and so forth in it. And we're going out to printing right now on new booklets, which will include more contact details for utilities, floodline, priority services register, and grab bag items, so that should somebody be impacted by flood, for example, hopefully they can be better prepared. And
is that information also available online?
that information will be available online, and as I'm involved in writing the community risk register as well, I would plug that in the information's on that as well, which again can be found online.
Great.
And I work with young people through Crucial Crew events, now also has a focus on supporting their resilience. As we've spoken about through the SSRIs, we hold detailed risk information on our community's buildings, water risks and wildfire risk information, and our risk-based intervention programme allows us to inspect buildings with high community value, like Damien referenced, such as schools in our rural locations whose loss due to fire would have an outsized impact on the local population.
Brilliant, thank you. I think the only thing I was going to ask about, because as you say, we've touched on some of this stuff in the previous presentation, was just the public safety officer role, and just how that interfaces with other partners. I think you mentioned Yorkshire Ambulance Service, and just at the moment, those public safety officers are operating in some of our most rural communities, I think, but just how that role works, and just anything about the way in which it interacts with partners.
I suppose that, yeah, so that they work out there on behalf of the fire service, North Yorkshire Police, and the ambulance service, and the sort of key advantage of them, as well as being able to be located and placed out in some of the more rural areas where it's harder to deliver services because of the rurality, they have those three hats on. So when they are talking to people, providing advice, they're able to collate all of that information and support, which would normally have come from three different agencies, under that single hat, and provide it to people, and essentially give a more effective support to those people.
Yeah, great. All right, thank you. Can we move on to the next one?
So this is the last slide, and it's just talking about our on-call activity. So our on-call staff, which make up the majority of our fire stations, they provide an essential service to the most rural communities. But due to changing work habits and demographics, the role of an on-call firefighter is becoming harder to sustain. So we have dedicated staff and work ongoing to support our on-call crews and ensure they remain a resilient part of our organisation. In order to achieve some of this, we've provided vehicles at on-call stations to allow staff to participate in prevention and other risk reduction activity. We've streamlined the recruitment processes to allow for more efficient introduction of staff. And we've also profiled our on-call stations for improved advertising for on-call roles, so we can go and we can look to see the sort of people who would typically, or we would look to, people in the right age bracket, for example, who may be interested in being firefighters. And if we're able to tell where those people live, then we can, whether it be through mail drops or so forth, look to sort of focus our recruitment activity a little bit more. There have been changes to the commitment required by our on-call staff, which may attract more people into the role. And what we've also seen recently as well is firefighters who may have left the on-call in the last couple of years. We're starting to see some of those people coming back into the organisation as well, which is a real benefit, because they're obviously coming back in and they've already got their skills and training and so forth. And lastly, we're working with local employers to recognise the role they play in supporting the staff to undertake that job.
Brilliant. Yes, and I just wanted to reiterate all of that, really, and to thank all of the on-call firefighters and their employers who support them to undertake this work and to support our communities across York and North Yorkshire. In particular, that last point around working with local employers is something I know the Mayor and I are really keen to identify how the Combined Authority might be able to better support that work with employers, and the recognition of local employers who are flexible around allowing on-call firefighters both to be released to do the work as an on-call firefighter, but also if they've been deployed as an on-call firefighter to understand that might mean if they've been out, for example, overnight, that might mean that they need to be given some additional time the following day. So just anything that we can do more widely across the Combined Authority to support our on-call firefighters. They are such an integral part of our service in York and North Yorkshire because of the nature of our geography. So that is, all of that work is really welcome. It's really heartening to hear that people who had left might be coming back, so that's brilliant. And obviously, I think there's generally a permanent call for people who might be interested in becoming on-call firefighters to be able to apply. But if you could just if you wanted to just finish by just saying a few words about how anyone who might be interested in becoming an on-call firefighter would go about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So on-call firefighters, we're generally looking for people who live within 4 minutes of their local fire station, because they obviously need to be able to respond, or who work within 4 minutes of the local fire station. We are permanently recruiting for those roles, and if people go online, then they can see the information that'll direct them towards an application form. And also, I would say, call in at the local fire station to, if there's people there, ask them about the role. Generally speaking, firefighters are pretty friendly people, and they'll look to welcome you and support you and provide any advice that they can.
That's brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. That's been extremely useful. And again, just to thank all of our on-call firefighters for the work that they do and their employers do in enabling them to support the public in that way. Thank you ever so much, Ewan. And I think we are moving on to the spotlight section, which we decided that we were going to raise the issue of e-bikes, scooters and battery charger fires relating to them, because it had been something that had been raised a number of times with me, both through the Police and Crime panel, but also more widely just aware of that being an increasing level of demand on the service. So I don't know who's going to talk me through anything on this. I'm just particularly interested in whether there has been an increase, and whether that is, or whether that is just anecdotal, how many of those kinds of fires there might have been, and what people can do to prevent that kind of thing happening if they're an e-bike, e-scooter user. I'm
happy to pick this one up.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom.
Yeah. So a little bit about another acronym while we're on with acronyms. These are often known as PLEVs, which are personal light electric vehicles, because it also mobility scooters incorporated into this as well. So as a service, we haven't seen a considerable increase in incidents. However, as a sector, we have, as a sector, predominantly around a lot of the more urban metropolitan areas. They're seeing up to double the amount over the last 2 to 3 years. And so this question comes timely because we've just put something on. We've just shared some information on our social media sites from West Midlands, who had a tragic fire where 2 people lost their lives due to the charging of a PLEV. So yeah, that is now available on ours with some useful links to go with that. So yeah, so the advice that we're providing at the moment, we've increased the information on our social media and on our website. And as Ewan spoke about recently, we've also we're just about to change our booklet on the 1st of April, our Home Fire Safety Visit booklet, and within that there's going to be more information about the safe use and charging of these products. The advice that we sort of provide and some key information for people who do use them. The first and foremost is please buy from a reputable supplier or retailer. Make sure they remain well maintained and serviced. This one's a really important one. Make sure you use manufacturer approved charging devices and always check them for wear and tear. Make sure you don't charge them near combustible or flammable materials, and please, where we have seen tragic incidents around the sector, please don't charge them in escape routes, especially if it's a communal escape route as well, because that has been seen in premises where you've got multiple occupants. Make sure you always charge them as well when you are actually awake and in the premise. Don't leave them charging when you're not there, or certainly when you're going to sleep. And make sure you turn off your charger when you're not using it. And as you spoke about previously, Deputy Mayor, make sure you've had home fire safety visits on and you've got working smoke alarms within your domestic premise. And like I say, we have got more advice on our website with links to other areas for more further information.
Great. JD, did you want to come in?
Yeah, apologies, Deputy Mayor, my computer can't cope unless I keep the camera off, so apologies for that. Just as a point to know, this isn't currently part of the data provision that services providing to central government, but that is changing this year, anticipated from April, because of the increase that we've seen. So we'll have a much more data-rich picture nationally to start to inform decisions and firefighting actions. There is one area where, if anybody wanted the statistics on this, on the government website for the Office Product Safety and Standards, which we can share the link after this meeting, which backs up everything Thomas said there, that ultimately most of the fires are in post-market conversions, i.e. people buying them online and doing them themselves. Unfortunately, most of those fires then occur in flats and masonettes. And of course, there is a shared risk then in those properties, just in line with what we said for Grenfell, because then you're in a shared building and shared access and egress. So it really is where people need to remember the safety of others as well as themselves within this space. Thank you.
And just to pick up on that last point, and it also related to that issue we were talking around statutory engagement of the fire service in planning in particular. So if our local authority partners are, as they will be, taking planning applications around either licensing of houses of multiple occupancy or just wider planning around that kind of facility, I guess one of those issues would be around whether or not there could be more a widespread provision of safe charging facilities in plans for new buildings, for example, but also what consultation ideally you would like to be able to have around those kind of e-bikes, e-scooters in particular, when the likelihood is or the chances of someone potentially putting it in a hallway, for example, to pick up on Tom's point about an escape route, to charge it there, and what could happen through planning to ensure that risk was minimised.
So wherever we are a statutory consultee, as you alluded to there within the planning authorities, then the fire service will give advice to the responsible persons as well for those premises. So, for instance, in high-rise buildings or in buildings in multiple occupation, there will be under the regulatory reform order a person responsible for the safety of persons in that building, and we are part of that and are part of that advisory role, and we inspect those premises. From a consultation perspective, we're always open to work with any partner to provide any information to improve safety. They can reach out to the service. The details are on our website of how they can reach Tom's team, and we will advise appropriately. And of course, from a statutory provision, make sure that we are doing our utmost to provide that safety and assurance into the community.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it feels like it's one of those areas of technology that has moved really quickly, and it often takes regulations a while to catch up. And in the meantime, we just need to, which it sounds like the service is doing, do everything we can to ensure that people are being kept as safe as possible. I look forward to seeing the booklet, and I will make sure I have a look. I wonder if we could share as part of the slide pack some of those links that Ewan referred to in his presentation, in particular to those pieces of information for the public. If we could also just make sure that we're putting those up with the details about this particular meeting when we put things on the website, it might be useful to share those links at the same time. Right, I think the final section, which I think will be relatively brief today, around the HMICFRS inspection update. I don't know how much we are able to say at this stage, but are we back with Damien?
It is with me, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Brilliant. I'll leave it with you. I assume that you're going to tell us anything that you're able to tell us.
Certainly, yeah. So with regards to the HMICFRS update, We are at that intervening period between all of the work we have done to complete our previous recommendations and areas for improvement, and we are awaiting our next inspection report. So we got inspected from the start of January. We received a very hot debrief on the 20th of February. That hot debrief didn't contain any judgments, either indicative or substantiated, but we were cautiously optimistic following that meeting that the narrative did suggest that the inspectors had sort of understood the improvement journey and the direction of travel that we have been on. So with that in mind, there aren't many slides today. We
Didn't think there would be.
We do still have the standards of behaviour and misconduct handling report. As you can see there, the ones that are in blue, they have all been completed. The ones in green are on track. We did pause the HMI specific meetings for whilst we were getting inspected. A lot of people that sit on that meeting were being interviewed by inspectors. Since the point that this presentation was developed, that recommendation on recommendation 8, that has now been completed. And we held a meeting this week just to ask senior responsible owners all of those recommendations that were due in February. We're asking for an update and preferably a completion of those recommendations prior to our next meeting, which will be March the 18th. So by our next OPM, we should see, Deputy Mayor, that we will be on track to complete all the misconduct handling recommendations. A number of these recommendations are very similar to what we've already completed within the culture and values recommendations. So it shouldn't be too much of an issue for us to be able to capture that evidence. Obviously, people were really focused over the last 2 months of making sure we presented a positive picture of the service and an accurate reflection to the inspectors that were actually inspecting us through January and February.
No, that's completely understandable. Just one question just on the standards of behaviour.
Yes.
Just if you can say anything more about what work is taking place to address some of those concerns that have been raised nationally around standards and behaviours, and just particularly in regard of North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, just what work is taking place there, and also just what should the public and firefighters what should we be expecting from this in terms of standards? Just anything you can add on that.
Yes, certainly, Deputy Mayor. So the report that came out, there is a link there, and that is available on your website. On these slides, there's a link to the whole report. What actually happened when HMI brought this out, there was 35, I believe, culture and values recommendations. Services up and down the country, they took a differing approach to addressing those recommendations. Within North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, we responded to each one of those recommendations with HMI and closed off them prior to these recommendations coming out. Some services hadn't taken that approach and they hadn't addressed the culture and values recommendations. So the wording within this report was slightly more pointy, should I say, that they were really now requesting that people and services took the appropriate action. What we've done with regards to this, we've done a huge amount of work. I know you're aware, and hopefully some of the public are aware of the massive amount of work we've done in collaboration with Huddersfield University on Framework for Change and trying to establish a cultural framework and a leadership charter to bring the organisation forward. We've also done some very much improvements to processes with regards to misconduct handling. We do have things now like an independent reporting line. So anyone within service that wants to raise something up, they can go through to a service that we've got provided by the company Crime Stoppers. They can give that information anonymously. And if they want a response, we would do that via that third-party provider. So all things like that we'd put in place for the culture and values, but they cut across to this report as well. So one of the areas which has seen us close off a couple of these recommendations, we actually commissioned our internal auditors, RSM, to look at how we manage misconduct within North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, and for them to provide a report for us, and that came back with really good assurance levels around the way in which we're doing it. So it's making sure that when there are disciplines, grievances, that they're acknowledged in the appropriate way and that they're resolved in as timely a manner as we possibly can do. So I think with regards all of these recommendations, Deputy Mayor, like I've said, I am fairly confident that come the 18th of March, all those in February will be able to be closed down, and we will hit the timelines for the remaining 6 recommendations that you can see there. A couple of the later recommendations, they are dependent on national work, either through NFCC or Government Home Office, for us to be able to do some of those. So that's why we haven't tried to address them earlier than we could.
Okay, great. I don't know whether the chief wanted to just come in just in terms of what the public should be able to expect in terms of standards and just any reassurance around the work that's been taking place. JD, if it's possible for you to just say a few words before we just look at the timeline for the formal inspection and what people can then expect from that.
Of course, thank you. The public can be assured that our firefighters are turning out are culturally and professionally competent. The training that we do covers everything from equality, diversity, inclusion, and of course, importantly, to the operational response that we provide. We're providing training across the board for everything here. So everything we do is to make sure that the response we provide to the communities is operationally and culturally competent. And we'll continue to do that in all areas.
Okay, great, thank you. And just as and when, just so that we understand the misconduct part of that, if someone is falling short for whatever reason, what happens and what's the process?
We're developing staff to try and make sure that people have the opportunity and engage with the opportunity to resolve disciplines, grievances, any points of disagreement informally first, because we have had a culture where things have risen up and go more formal unnecessarily, and that is part of the training. But ultimately, where there is misappropriation, where there is people that are misbehaving, then ultimately we will deal with that swiftly through our processes. We have to recognise that in any complaint there are more than one person within that, so we support everybody from a welfare perspective. But ultimately, if people are found through the discipline process, then they will be appropriately reprimanded, or if required, they will be dismissed from the service. Okay,
great, thank you. I assume this is a recurring slide in terms of something. Is this something we'll come back to at future meetings? In which case, Damien, I don't know whether it's possible to just share the timeline of the formal inspection. I know you mentioned it briefly just now.
Certainly.
I think that's the last slide, isn't it?
It is, Deputy Mayor. So we issued our documents. So a large number of our documents, I think there was over 70 documents that we sent to HMI prior to being inspected. From December onwards, we had virtual and in-person interviews with the inspectors. All of this included things like the strategic brief with yourself and the Chief Fire Officer in attendance, going through our strategic priorities and objectives and the improvements we've made since our last inspection. They had numerous interviews at all levels of the organisation. They also did some desktop exercises. So one of the exercises was in relation to tall buildings and how we give fire survival guidance and how communication works through control to the incident ground to people in incident command positions. From that, one of the things that was very pleasing, Deputy Mayor, during the feedback was the positive feedback that we got from the inspectors, that everyone, I think, that spoke to over 100 people within the organisation, and they said that everybody engaged with the inspectors in a really positive way. So from our point of view, that was extremely pleasing to hear the way in which colleagues had sort of engaged with the inspectors, because at times it is challenging when you're getting interviewed by inspectors. But yeah, it was really pleasing to hear that at the hot debrief. As I said previously, the hot debrief was on the 20th of February, and we are expecting a draft report at some point in April. That report won't be able to be shared at that time. That will be us to look through that report, feedback on it, and the main report for publication is highly likely sort of May, June time. So we will be cited in April, but it won't be able to be shared at that time. It's highly likely to be May, June.
Right, that's great, thank you. Just in terms of just another point of reassurance, really, that the work in terms of improvements and the previous areas for improvement, all of that work continues, I assume. But you may just want to reassure me on that point, that that work around continual improvements around previously identified issues is going on. We're not waiting for the inspection report to come out before we continue that work. Just I guess a call for the public then the next online public meeting for the Fire and Rescue Services is the 17th of April, which may be a time when the fire service has seen the report but it hasn't yet been published. So it could be an exciting meeting in which to see what you reveal in the inspection area of the meeting. Anything else you wanted to add, Damien or JD?
Just on those comments, Deputy Mayor, certainly from our point of view, all of the areas that were identified in the previous report, we had commented upon them. They were shown as a completed status on our behalf, but we do appreciate nothing stands still. All those areas we need to continue to look at, we need to continue to improve. There were a number of areas within the slides that we got from the hot debrief. From our point of view, it was pleasing for us that all of those areas are already being considered. We are going through the next community risk management planning cycle currently. All of those areas that get identified through HMI will obviously go into our improvement journey moving forward. And I think I can confidently say we will have areas for improvement this time. Services that have been judged as good and outstanding, they still get 5, 6, 7 areas for improvement. So we will get those areas for improvement. I think what we have now with our work with HMI is we've got the processes in place, we've got the structures in place to allow us to, when that report lands, for really quick, effective and efficient responses to whatever has been identified by the inspectorate.
Great, thank you. JD, do you want to say anything else before I close?
Just once again, thanks to the staff that engaged with the HMI in the way that they did. We look forward to the final report when it comes from there, and ultimately as assurance to both yourself and the public, this service will continue to improve. Thank you.
That is great, thank you. And yes, my thanks too to everyone who had to pull all those all that work together for the inspectors when they were here, and it was quite a long period of time that they were in the service. So thanks to all of those at all levels who've interacted with them. I think that concludes the agenda of the meeting for today. We have an online public meeting for the police service for North Yorkshire Police on the 20th of March, and then the fire and rescue services, the next online public meeting was on the 17th of April. Any updates on the slides from this meeting and all other meetings are on the website, and we will add in the links to that public information around those safety visits if people want them. And with that, I can close the meeting today. Thank you to everyone for attending and for your contributions, particularly thank you to those who have presented, and I will see you at the next meeting. Thank you.